Welcome to Forward Progress, powered by the Hammer Betting Network. I am your host, Rob Pizzola, joined as always by my co-host, Clive Bixby. We are live on the Forward Progress YouTube channel, live on Twitch, on the Forward NFL channel, and we're live on Twitter as well, at the Hammer HQ and at Forward NFL. If this is your first time, what took you so long? I mean, seriously, though, if it is your first time, we're going to review Week 8 in the NFL. We'll preview Monday Night Football. We will guess where the NFL Week 9 lines are going to open up, which direction they will move in over the course of the week. Both sides and totals, we don't discriminate. And if you can't stick around for the full show, no problem at all. I get it. It's Sunday night. Long night for you parents tomorrow, trick-or-treating with the kids and so on and so forth. The episode will be available in full when you wake up tomorrow morning, and will also be available in podcast form on Spotify and on Apple Music. Clive, how are things? I know you attended an NFL game today, if I'm correct.
I did. Was live for the New England Jets game, which was definitely a tale of two halves. Jets looked terrible in the second half, which wasn't surprising. But Mac Jones in the first half just was not playing well, not dealing well with the pressure. He wasn't getting a lot of time, to be fair, but with that pressure, not making a lot of good decisions. But it was another fun experience. It was great to be out there.
So, personal question for you, because I only attend NFL primetime games. I can't do like the Sunday 1 o'clocks and just be missing out on everything else, because I find I'm glued to my phone more than anything if I do that. What is the experience like for you at those games? Because, I mean, listen, to each their own. Some people just enjoy like the stadium environment and being out there. But for me, it's like almost like an opportunity cost, right? It's like I could be at the game, or I could just be on my couch watching all the games instead.
So I'll be honest, here's what happened. The first half, pretty much watched the entire game. I was lucky enough to be invited by some of the play up staff to be in their box today. And, thank you, Colin Murphy. I watched pretty much the entire first half out on the field. Not on the field, but, second half started going in and out as games started closing, and I wanted to start checking my bets. Got the two TVs up, and I got my phone, and I'm basically sweating all of my stuff. So the more and more that game seemed sealed for New England, it's exactly that. Like, I can't turn away from all the other stuff. And I want to be as prepared as I can for this too. So yeah, opportunity cost is a good way to put it.
How did the day end up for you from a betting perspective?
It went really well. So two bigger bets. One was Carolina +6, which I bet earlier in the week, and then today I did put money on New England money line. So those two hit. Carolina was back and forth. I'm sure we'll talk about that. And then I was fortunate enough that all my smaller bets hit too. So last 2 weeks have been pretty good to me.
That's
How
good.
about you?
Same sides as you. Probably worse price, definitely worse price on Carolina. I played that a little bit later in the week, but still really liked it. I made that game 3, Atlanta 3, ended up playing 4.5s and 4 on Carolina. Also was on New England on the spread, -1.5 there. Honestly, I feel like today should have been better. I had a really large play on Arizona, which we can talk about that afterwards. But if you look at the Arizona-Minnesota box score and you were to just hide the team names, you'd be hard-pressed to figure out which team won by 8 points, because it was such an even game. But that's the NFL. It is what it is. And don't live in the past. I mean, I guess we do live in the past for a little bit of this show at the very least. But Michael Fortner says, "Good evening, gentlemen. I'll be attempting to guess the lines alongside you tonight. Only line I've seen so far is Philly-Houston spread." I actually encourage people to do that. I think it's actually a really good exercise. Create your own numbers. Try to guess what the numbers will be before you even bet them. And then that way you can actually go out and bet them after the fact, instead of having this preconceived notion in your head of, I need to bet on a specific team. So let's get into it. This week specifically, anything that you felt strongly about that was solidified by today's games?
That was solidified. I actually had a very good feeling that the Eagles would still put up a lot of points, and then that game would go over. That was something that didn't surprise me. The other thing that didn't surprise me was the Cowboys putting up more points than I think were expected for them either. Those were the two that didn't really surprise me. And then the Rams offense still struggling. That didn't surprise me either. Those are probably the three that come to mind the
Uh,
quickest.
yeah, I think I held out more hope for the Rams. I don't know why. I think stupidly, I would say in hindsight, but uh, part of why I kind of like the Rams was they got Brian Allen, their center back. They're coming off a bye where I felt like they couldn't get that O line in shape over the course of just like 1 week, but maybe an extra week off. I don't know. I convinced myself into the Rams being something that they clearly are not. I think we're seeing certain teams this year, whether that's the Bucks, the Rams, and now the Packers live on Sunday Night Football, down 17 to the Buffalo Bills as we talk through this, that are just not what we expected. And we have to kind of realize that that is the case. For me in particular, Zach Wilson is terrible, solidified. There is no way that the Jets, like holding the Patriots offense to 3.8 yards per play, 38% success rate. There is absolutely no way the Jets should have lost that game today. But Zach Wilson, the guy he's a disaster. Like I've never seen a quarterback just throw an interception. Well, I have seen it, but it's so rare. Trying to throw the ball away, can't even get the ball out of bounds. Just threw it directly to, like, he is so bad. And I feel bad because I think the Jets kind of have a good defense. They have a good coaching staff, but they're just so limited with this guy at quarterback, and they have to see it out because they drafted him so highly.
And his lows are so low. Like the bottom end of his range is just really bad. And, you know, it's a little too early to go the sunk cost route with him, I think. I think you have to play it out and give him a little bit more time. But I really, if anybody's expecting a Josh Allen type of turnaround, I think they're going to be sorely disappointed.
I agree. I mean, listen, it can happen. We've
Sure.
definitely seen young quarterbacks. Peyton Manning comes to mind, who's horrible for, I don't know, maybe the first year and a half of his NFL career. I'm a Cowboys fan. Troy Aikman would be another one that comes to mind. But he just does not he does not seem to have the mental capacity to play the position. Like,
Yeah, it's a different type of struggle, it seems, than what those guys were doing. It seemed like eventually, as those guys matured, they started picking up on things, and those mistakes that you really shouldn't be making in your second year, they weren't making anymore.
agreed. Selfishly, as a Dallas Cowboys fan, for those who are watching the video, you do see the Cowboy symbol behind me. Definitely solidified. I mean, it's hard to say for sure because it is the Bears defense, but the Cowboys offense is better off when Tony Pollard is the workhorse back, plain and simple. He's just that much better than Ezekiel Elliott in terms of, like dynamic skill. So definitely to me, that was one thing that stood out. Going back to last week, particularly what I had said about last week, I said Cincinnati's offense is way better. That was solidified with last week's performance. We will see that on Monday Night Football, whether or not that is the case. And additionally, Tampa Bay's offense is a dumpster fire, was solidified last week. They end up losing outright to the Baltimore Ravens on Thursday night. Think we might have lost Clive in the short term. He will join here really quickly. Steven brings up the Elijah Moore comment today when asked about his chemistry with Zach Wilson. I don't even know. I don't get the ball. So that's interesting. But Clive will be back. The show goes on. Get into, I think, stuff that greatly changed my opinions on any team this week. And the one that stands out to me would be the 49ers, particularly the offense. So I, like, again, I'm not a running backs don't matter type of guy. I never have been. I think there are certain dynamic playmakers that, as we welcome Clive back in here, there's certain dynamic playmakers to me that are like maybe undervalued because everybody just like, oh, the running back doesn't matter. He's replaceable by this person, replaceable by that person. The 49ers offense with Christian McCaffrey is absurdly good. because he is
fun to
just a
watch.
safe. Like, I thought no Debo, no Kyle Juszczyk. Not that Juszczyk, he's a fullback, but like they use him so much, right? Whether it's in the passing game or run blocking or whatever. I did not think that they would have the success that they had today. And adding Christian McCaffrey, one thing about Garoppolo is he'll get the ball out. Like, he's not going to throw it downfield a whole lot, but he gets it in his playmakers' hands. And he's just bouncing off tackles. And man, the 49ers, to me, they're like legit Super Bowl contender, despite the fact that they haven't had a great start to the year and they've had a ton of injuries. I can see this offense starting to hum going forwards.
So that was going to be one of the things that I thought we would talk through later, because I heard you and Alex talking about the Vikings on the halftime show. And yeah, they're the favorites for the NFC North, but I don't think the NFC is strong at all. However, I see the 49ers having potential to pull away from the rest of the conference. Like, they have that type of ability, and McCaffrey is that other playmaker. They get the ball in people's hands in motion. They get the ball into their speed guys' hands. Now they have Debo and McCaffrey. If those guys can get healthy and be healthy throughout their playoff run, they could be dangerous for a lot of teams.
It's almost like George Kittle's forgotten too now. He did catch a touchdown to seal the game today, but like, another weapon. Brandon Ayuk was amazing. Mm-hmm. Like, they are surrounded by talent, and as long as the O-line can hold up, like, obviously we know what the case is here, right? Like, you got to avoid the Jimmy G back-breaking interception, and you have to avoid that on a weekly basis. And that's not going to change at any time going forwards. But now with Trent Williams back at left tackle, healthy offensive line, in fairness, he did throw the back-breaking interception today. It was just dropped by Jalen Ramsey over the middle of the field. He fumbled it a bunch of times and dropped it. But it does feel like Stephen mentions it here. Fast forward to San Fran Philly NFC Championship game. Someone else mentioning it, Scott, as well. San Fran Philly in playoffs opens Philly -3. San Fran gets bet. Probably. I mean, those to me look like I'd maybe throw Dallas into the mix in terms of like a clear top 3 for me in the NFC right now. Would be Eagles, Cowboys, 49ers, and you can interchange San Fran, Dallas however you want. But I don't think that there's anyone even remotely close to those 3 in the NFC right now.
No, and all 3 of them have defenses that can absolutely play when healthy.
Yep. I mean, that's a huge factor. Anything for you today that you saw that would have greatly changed your opinion of a team?
Well, I've said this will be the 3rd week in a row that I've said this. I still don't understand the Raiders. I understand the Saints have, potential on defense, and they're probably not as bad as they've been. But the Raiders putting up a goose egg today was not something that I anticipated at all. So that caught me by surprise. The Seahawks-Giants game, Giants finally played somebody that I think has some talent and didn't give a game away. So that wasn't necessarily surprising either. That's really the main one. Raiders is the one that really, really just sticks with me as a surprise, and I don't know how to grade them going forward.
So, like, if you throw this Raiders game into the models, it's going to significantly downgrade the Raiders offense because the Raiders had 183 net yards today, 3.3 yards per play. They tied Houston for the worst EPA per play on the board today, which
that's an accomplishment.
I was just going to say, I don't know if anyone watched Houston's offense today, but it was pathetic. They had a 33% success rate offensively. Now, I'll throw out some commentary on the Raiders today. You tell me if you think that there's anything to it or not. Might have lost you again, Clive, but I'll throw it out for people there and we'll have you rejoin. I know sometimes these streams get a little bit tricky at night. So essentially, the Raiders all week are dealing with this flu situation, right? And they don't get to practice first team reps with all these guys over the course of the week. They're basically struggling to get things together because of, everyone's out. I mean, they don't know if they're going to play for flu. So they don't get these first team reps overall. And then essentially what happens is you get this type of game where no practice over the course of the week, don't know what kind of game plan you're running. offense just looks completely and utterly lost for the entirety of the game. So I think that I don't even know that I will include this Raiders game in my model going forwards. That might be like something really weird for someone to say. Might be the complete wrong move, but I just don't think that this is indicative of the Las Vegas Raiders offense. So, what was reported here, Brimo, is a good question. It was the wide receiver room with a few other individual players that did not practice, but they could not get an offensive game plan together. Like Derek Carr was not throwing to his wide receivers in practice this week. So, I don't know. Maybe I'm just making excuses. You just don't see the Raiders offense look that bad that often. They were fourth in EPA per play. And essentially today put in a complete dud. Flu game for the Raiders. Don't know that it matters, Clive. I don't know that. I feel like there's just certain circumstances where you can kind of dismiss a game. And maybe like I should have thought of this beforehand and said, going to be tough to put together a decent game plan without being able to throw to wide receivers in practice for the entire week and get stuff together. But they look lost. And I do think the Saints are also undervalued, which is a contributor as well.
Yeah. So one of the things that I did this week was earlier with the line, what it was, I did take an over on the Raiders Saints. And then today when Waller was announced out, I kind of bought off that where I had a little bit of closing line value. Again, we talk about closing line value, that gives you options. So when things like this happen, that you can buy off it and you turn a negative EV play into what's probably a neutral EV play overall. So, yeah, I'll downgrade the Raiders a little bit from my, wonky rating system for them, but I'm not going to overly go crazy with it either. It's one game still, and there were other circumstances like you mentioned.
So like we do it, we talk about this every week, but we make sure to talk about what we think people will overreact to the following week, like the average fan. And I had Raiders just written in caps across my sheet. Like it was horrible. They played a horrible game. And I think why in particular people will overreact to this is most people think the Saints stink. And I don't think the Saints stink. I think the Saints have been plagued by turnovers this year, but they were number 2 team in terms of net success rate coming into this week. I think that they've just been literally killed by turnovers, and maybe that'll continue going forwards. Andy Dalton's not a guy that's going to protect the ball every week, right? They're away from Jameis now, which is, at least an upgrade in terms of turnovers, but the Saints don't stink. So it's going to look like New Orleans, this bad football team, just slaughtered Las Vegas. What's wrong with Las Vegas? And I think that's where we're going to see the biggest overreaction. We'll guess the lines when they come out, but Las Vegas does go to Jacksonville next week to take on the Jags, who will be coming back from London. And I suspect that line is going to look a little bit differently than it might have looked like going into this week.
Yeah, they're both of those teams, the Raiders and the Saints, they're just like in that firm middle third that 12 isn't that much farther away from 20. You know what I mean? Like, and this is one of those performances that show that there's just not a ton of separation in the middle part of the league. The Texans are extremely bad. Like that's a given. The Bills are really, really good. And then it just starts getting tighter and tighter in the middle.
Agreed. It's really challenging this year. The breakup of tiers is very different to years past. I know last week I brought up unpredictable and showed the NFL market rankings, but like this year you kind of have Buffalo, big drop off, and then you get like your KC, and I don't even know that the market puts Philly in that range just yet, but you get like KC, Philly, then you get your drop off of like San Fran, Dallas, Baltimore, Cincy, and I think Tampa Bay would be in that range going into this week. Maybe they get downgraded even more now. And then there's just like this group of like, honestly, maybe 15 teams that are within like 3 points of one another. There's just no one that separates themselves there.
Agreed.
Yeah. Anything else that stood out to you as potentially something that people might overreact to this week?
No, that was really it. I think a lot went according to plan. The Colts are done. For the most part, I think they're kind of throwing in the towel. I, watching the Colts come back without Wentz today, there was a little bit of a satisfaction in that for me because this is, I think, the third week now that I've had a bet on the Commanders that has come into fruition. So there's a little bit of satisfaction there. But to me, that's not necessarily all that surprising. It's just, things went to par.
That was one of the games today. This happens every week in the NFL where someone might feel really, really comfortable with a position and then it just evaporates like that. Like at one point in the second half, it looked like Indy was just okay. I think when they went up 16-7 maybe in that game, it was just like, this is done. See you later, Washington cake. And then it just like flips on a dime. And that Terry McLaurin catch late in the game was absolutely fantastic. Pulling it away from Stephon Gilmore at the goal line there to get the team into field goal range. So really good game overall. There are people who are going to be listening to this on Monday. I do want to do a quick preview of Monday Night Football. I've shared my thoughts on this week. Market was actually very interesting this week in this game because once Jamar Chase got ruled out, a bunch of Cleveland money came in right away, as you would expect. But then since he got bet back up, almost like maybe half an hour afterwards, where the same line was available in market as when Jamar Chase was announced out. And I honestly don't really know what to make of this game, but I feel like Cincy is just coming together now. And it's a team like the Bengals is going to be very hard for me to get right because you have like this season-long data that makes them, in my opinion, look worse than they actually are right now. But you can't just like dismiss the games that happened earlier in the season. But they're playing a different scheme on offense. They're running all this stuff out of shotgun. They're passing way more. So it's like, what do you do in this case? And I think that creates just a huge amount of uncertainty with Cincinnati.
Yeah, so I have a decent play on Cleveland 3.5 tomorrow. If the Bengals don't go back to that over reliance running on first down and things like that, if they go to that, I feel a little bit more comfortable in my position. If they continue with the game plan the way they've gone the last few weeks, not running the ball on first down and being unsuccessful and having 2nd and 8, 2nd and 9s all the time, then I feel a little less worse. And I could see myself maybe trading out in the middle of the game. But to your point, you can't throw away the beginning of the season, but if it's a different scheme, yes, it's the same team on paper, but they're doing something completely different. And that's what's kind of difficult about the NFL too, is you're dealing with 17 games now for each team. The NBA, you could see 82 games. And, like the Celtics last year, 30 games in, something like that, their whole identity changed. So those are the things that you look for to where the market hasn't adjusted well enough yet. And that's where I think you could take advantage. And the Bengals might be a team like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just very tough because you do have to draw a line in the sand and say, like, I am now willing to bet this team and say that they are a completely different team than what I am typically accustomed to. And that's always challenging because you're taking a stance, right? And I mean, I like doing that type of stuff, but there's always going to be some second guessing whenever it comes to that stuff as well. All right, we'll leave it at that. I can't say much more other than I have a strong lean on the Bengals. We'll see how the Browns' secondary injuries play out. Greg Newsome and Greedy Williams are expected to play, so probably nothing there for me. But I do feel like the Bengals are a team that might potentially go on a run here, and I might be looking back and scratching my head saying, why didn't I not win more off of my perception of this team? If you're looking for a full preview for Bengals at Browns tomorrow night, you can join myself and my co-host for prime time at my co-host is Eric Eager, I should say his name, of Sumer Sports, 8 p.m. Eastern tomorrow. That'll be live on the Hammer HQ YouTube and Twitch channels, live on Twitter as well. Make sure you subscribe to the Hammer HQ. Also, make sure you subscribe wherever you're watching or listening to this now, as every single follower definitely helps. All right, let's get into it. Let's do week 9, guess the lines. And this is going to be, I don't know how many teams are on the bye next week. I think it's more. There was 4 this week. It might be up to 6. It's going to be one week where it's up to 6. So we might have fewer games to talk about. But we'll start and we'll try to go through rotation number order here, unless It's either the Bills or Packers who are still live right now. We'll get to that at the end if possible. But Eagles at Texans is going to be our starting point for Thursday Night Football. This is going to be, thankfully, I'm not doing prime time for the Hammer for Thursday Night Football. That's a Joey Kanish, Andrew Walker special right there. Obviously, it's a game we can bet, though. So the Texans suck today. Like, this number has to be astronomically high for a road team in the NFL for the Eagles.
So I kind of quickly went through like all the games for this week, and you're going to have a few significant road favorites, but a lot of road favorites in general. It's going to be, I think, more than half of the slate. So I would open this probably at 13. And I would not be shocked if the Eagles take a little bit of money at 13. I think it trends towards 13.5 before it goes back down to 12.5.
So the Eagles are very tough, in my opinion, to value in market, because the Eagles get bet every week. Like, almost every week, the Eagles take money at some point. They took money on game day today against Pittsburgh. We've seen this not only this year, but going back to last year. So there's influential money. There's someone out there that bets heavily on the NFL that they like the Eagles pretty consistently. So it's very hard for me to say that, the Eagles are not going to take money in a specific spot unless the line is large. I would say if this line is under 14, then the Eagles get bet up to 14. Like, I would probably put it out at 14 and just see where it goes. It almost seems insane to say it, because prior to this week, like, if I was setting this line this week, not having seen Pittsburgh, Philly, or Houston, Tennessee, it probably would have been a lot closer to 10. But the Texans cannot stop the run. Like, they are going to get shredded. They got shredded by a quarterback in Malik Willis. Like, Malik Willis, Derrick Henry. Henry had a field day. They didn't even have to respect the pass today against a Tennessee offensive line that has major injuries, and they got killed on the ground. And how does that change? Like, it's not going to change against the Eagles. So then it becomes a matter of, can the Texans score? Are they capable of backdooring? Maybe, but this line has to be 14, in my opinion, in order to get anyone to consider taking the Texans.
Yeah, and you read on the Texans, I think is pretty good. I mean, I had a bet on Titans before Tannehill was out, and to be honest, because of what I thought their game plan was going to be, I really didn't care all that much. Like, I wasn't like in some sort of rush to get off that game because Tannehill wasn't going to play. This was going to be a Derrick Henry game where nothing was going to happen good. It just happened that Derrick Henry had a game. So what are you thinking on a total for this when you have such a discrepancy? Like, Houston's probably the worst offensive team in the league. And other than the Lions, they might be the worst defensive team too. Like, now that I think about it, like, there might not be anybody worse.
Yeah, I'm looking at Houston's efficiencies that I have. I mean, technically I have Carolina's offense slightly worse than Houston, but after I input my numbers from today, that's almost certainly going to change. So I think you're right. Like, Houston, let's put it this way. Houston is definitely a bottom 3 offense and definitely a bottom 5 defense. Like, they just, like, Nico Collins was out today. Maybe they get him back. Maybe that helps their offense a little bit. But overall, if I had to guess at total, I'm probably going to say like 42.5. And I actually don't know where it will go because I have no confidence in that number whatsoever.
Yeah. So when I have two numbers, I tend to write the one that I think it's going to open and which way it's going to go, or like which way it's more likely to go. So I have 43, 42.5. So I'm with you there.
Okay. So just trying to look at the schedules from these teams this year, median total, like in terms of final score for Houston games this year has been 40. Eagles have been around 43. So yeah, I think that's a decent enough guess. I don't really know where it's going to go, nor do I think I will have action on this game in any capacity. But yeah, tough one, man. Really, I'm interested to see who the Eagles play the following week. It's the Commanders. Just wondering if it's like one of those games where it's like go into Houston, get the win, get out healthy, rest the starters if you can. That potentially opens up the back door for
and that's
Texans.
a Monday night game too against Washington at home. That's
a weird scheduling quirk, right? For Philly to get a Thursday followed by a Monday, it's like a 11-day in between.
Yeah.
Unusual.
Yeah.
Okay. First game, rotation 451, 452. Indianapolis Colts go to New England to take on the Patriots. Patriots, like we mentioned off the top, really ugly offensive performance today. Won the game basically because of their defense in terms of forcing turnovers, forcing 3 New York Jets turnovers today, but 3.8 yards per play offensively from Mac Jones. What I particularly noticed about watching, and you were at the game yourself, but a lot of run, pass early for New England, very conservative, which kind of worked out. I mean, I kind of feel like Belichick does get into these game plans where it's like, well, we just have a lemon of a quarterback on the other side. Let's not make the mistake. And like he will, let's force him to. And that worked out for them today. Indy loses a heartbreaker at home, 17-16. Pretty even game. They out-yarded Washington in terms of yards per play, 6 to 5.9. Very close around the board. Difference maker, Colts in the red zone, came up with a touchdown just 1 of 3 times, which really hurt them in that game. Couple things at play here, or at least one thing at play here, is going to be Bill Belichick against the young quarterback, which comes up pretty regularly, especially against, it didn't really work against Justin Fields Monday Night Football. He's more mobile, but that's also what I wanted to talk about as well. The Patriots have played 2 quarterbacks this year who I would consider mobile quarterbacks. Lamar Jackson, Justin Fields. Those were games where they couldn't stop anything. So does Ellinger give the Colts a chance to maybe move the ball because he's a little bit more athletic in this one?
Yeah, I saw it a little bit with him today, not a ton. I mean, I didn't get to see as much of that game, or the highlights as I should have, but I think there's an element to it that you don't have to worry about, obviously, with Matt Ryan, who was a giant statue. I don't think that's enough for that team to be able to kind of not manipulate, but exploit anything that the Patriots have from a weakness. It's just not a strong enough running quarterback, I guess.
Yeah,
but
fair enough. He's just more. I mean, I guess relative to Matt Ryan, it's night and day. But you're right. It's probably not a true. It's not a Lamar Jackson. It's a lot of Justin Fields. So, granted, that's a good point.
But here's the thing. I think it is an element that if they were playing the Matt Ryan Colts, I would feel better about a Patriots team against that team that was going to be definitely one-dimensional. So there's validity to it. It's just how much do you really think it matters? And for everyone that's listening, I don't know if you guys heard this before, but we don't look at the lines beforehand. Did a quick scan earlier. I had a hard time putting a number on this game. I am probably opening it at -6, but I don't feel good about it.
Yeah, so I was going to say I would guess Patriots -6.5, but I would guess that the Colts take money throughout the week. I don't think that there's going to be a lot of interest in laying points with the Patriots. The last time this happened was the Monday Night Football game where they lost to the Bears, where the Patriots did get bet up a little bit. Granted, it wasn't just like anything crazy, but they did get bet up a little bit in that game. I don't think that the Patriots are going to be appealing having to win by margin. They have won games by margin this year. Don't get me wrong. But when people think of that offense, it's not one that they would associate with a team that can continue to win by margin. So my guess would be 6.5 Patriots, one-way money on the Colts over the course of the week, maybe gets down to less than 6, something like 5.5 would be my guess. And this has to be a super low total. Like I would say this is not even in the 40s.
I have 40.5, but I would expect it to get bet down.
Yeah. 40.5, I think under money. I was guessing 39.5. We're not far off. We're not far off on that one, but
and this game might have already opened. Like we might have seen, like if Sunday numbers are out there, it might have started at 40.5 today. And if it's bet down to 39.5, I would not be surprised at all.
Yeah. Now, obviously, just want to preface for those out there, I'm not a meteorologist either. I'm not looking at what the weather is going to be like, full week from now. That's very hard to predict. These are things, though, you obviously have to take into account when you're betting the NFL in November. So just for those out there, be aware that can, obviously make an impact. The Miami Dolphins travel to Soldier Field to take on the Chicago Bears. A Bears defense today that when I say they got torched, they got torched. 7.8 yards per play for the Cowboys, 56% success rate for the Cowboys, 0.45 EPA per play for the Cowboys, which was the highest total of any team in the NFL this week. Felt like the Bears were trailing for the majority of the game, got a few lucky plays that worked in their favor as well, including an overturned fumble, roughing the passer on a turnover as well. So did Mac Jones earlier today, which we didn't talk about, but that one was clearly a roughing the passer. God, he was horrible. Mac Jones is horrible today. But we're on to this one. Dolphins looked offensively a lot better. They trailed 14-0 to the Lions. They trailed a lot of that game, but Tua opened it up. It is the Lions defense. Don't get me wrong. We have to account for that. But I definitely think that in the eyes of the market, Miami's getting upgraded and Chicago's getting downgraded going into next week.
So Miami gave 3.5 today, right? Like that's what did it close at 3.5 or did it close at 4?
Miami
closed at 4.
It depends on the book. So Circa Las Vegas, Chris closed 4. We did see some 3, mostly 4s. You're right.
Yeah. So I think the Bears are viewed. Well, yeah, this is tough. I don't know where would you open this. I don't think it's going to be too far different from what the Dolphins-Lions game was, but I'm interested to see what you would think on this one first.
So Miami was one-way action again this week. They just kind of continuously got bet up. Chicago, early money on Dallas, a little bit of late money on the Bears today at game time. But I don't know. I'm going to guess something like, this is a really tough one. I'm going to say like I would throw out a Miami -6, and I would expect the Bears to take money at that number.
Yeah, I'm a little bit lighter than you are, but I think my number's probably more where the line gets to as opposed to where it opens.
Yep.
If this game ends at 4.5, I think that's probably right. But or 4 minus 120 if it goes that way. I mean, you don't see a ton of that at 4, but it could happen.
So my perspective is this, right? We've seen this very similarly with Dallas, right? Dallas back-to-back weeks played Detroit and Chicago. They closed 7.5. I can't remember exactly what it was with Detroit, but I think 7, right? And they closed roughly 10 against the Bears. Now, it's not really a 3-point difference because 8 is a little bit more valuable, but 9 is kind of dead at this point. So it's not apples to apples, but obviously the market has Detroit somewhat better than Chicago. So now Miami closes 4 on the road at the Lions today. It has to be higher than that, in my opinion.
It does.
So maybe it's not quite 6, and maybe you're right. It's closer to 4.5 or 5 or something like that. But I definitely can't see by game time, the Dolphins going off at 4 at Chicago as well.
Yeah. And despite what this game finished, the Dolphins Lions today, if they were to probably reline this, I don't think it ends at 4. I think it's probably closer to 5. But I think Detroit and Chicago are damn near interchangeable in terms of what their market value should be. So I think we're in the same little ballpark. I struggle a lot in that 4 to 6 range of where things should be. I mean, they're not dead numbers the same way that 8 and 9. It's not the same, obviously, but I think we're kind of grading them similar. It's just a matter of market closing versus what they're going to throw out there to open. But the market definitely likes the Dolphins more than they like the Bears for sure in terms of what their ratings are.
Yeah, I have a hard time putting a total on this game because the Bears offense is getting better, but they play they're exclusively on the ground, right? There's no real big aerial plays. There was a couple today against the Cowboys. So it makes it extremely challenging to put a total on them. But the Dolphins defense is not doing it for me overall right now. And I think this has to be probably in the mid 40s, like a 45. I would be more inclined to say it gets bet to the over. But then again, you got a November Chicago game. You got a warm weather team in Miami going there. Who knows how that impacts things? Potentially maybe just hangs around in that mid 45 range.
Yeah, I think that's fair. It's going to be obviously weather dependent. I mean, this game today, Dolphins Lions closed at 52 almost everywhere, some 52 and a half, it looks like, with some like less juice. The Lions have the worst defense in the league by far. So it's definitely, I think 45 is probably a decent number. And it might get up to like 45 and a half, 46.
Just want to respond to a comment here that came through the Forward Progress YouTube channel. I suppose I'm new to the show, but lines have been out for like 3 hours. No. Yes, fair enough. We purposely do not expose ourselves to the opening lines to do this. So we do try to guess where they would have opened and which direction the market will take them over the course of the week. So fair question, but definitely I am not looking at early lines. Neither is Clive, and we're doing our best to avoid those at all costs. All right. The Minnesota Vikings win yet again. They travel to Washington to take on the Commanders. So two teams that pulled out victories today. I mentioned this earlier. Vikings box score. Good luck trying to find a discrepancy between them and the Arizona Cardinals today, aside from that turnover number, which was 3 for Arizona, 1 for Minnesota. A huge muffed punt that swung the game in the favor of the Vikings when they were up 28-26, went on to score a touchdown on that drive. Washington, like a performance today, I guess you would say. They win the game. I think
and a Michael Pittman drop around midfield that, one play from there, they're in field goal range. So, I mean, they kind of just want a coin flip.
I completely forgot about that play. He was wide open on that one. That was after Washington was leading, correct? And Indy had a chance to drive the field to get into field goal range.
Yeah, under a minute left, with, I believe, no timeouts, I think was the situation. But I just remember the drop where he was around midfield and he wasn't going to get out of bounds, but they had enough time to stop the clock somehow. I don't remember the exact details, but that was a big drop and an uncontested drop.
Yeah, wide open. I think they had one timeout left. They could have used it and then maybe potentially got into field goal range. But it is what it is. Now, I feel like the sentiment on the Vikings is very much what I believe, which is that they've played nobody. They continue to beat nobody. They continue to pull out a lot of these coin flip games. This is a very tough one to put a number on because I almost feel like it's the same thing with the Giants, maybe with the Jets as well, where it's like this team is not as good as their record. Now, Minnesota, I think, shows a little bit more than those teams in specific, but I do think that I don't want to say no matter where the number comes out, I do think that Washington is going to be a popular side amongst the sharp community this week, purely because everyone has that expectation that Minnesota is just going to come back down to earth at some point soon.
I wouldn't be shocked if this opens at Vikings 6 and gets bet down quickly. Because I don't think it should be 6, but I think the market sentiment might be there. And based on priors and things like that, I think it could open 6. I mean, if it's me, I probably open it at Vikings -5.5, and I still think the Commanders take a little bit of money.
So Green Bay played in Washington a few weeks ago, game that they lost outright. And the Packers were roughly -4, -4.5. Gil brings up the same point in the chat as well. How is Minnesota viewed relative to Green Bay is the question.
I think they're viewed similar to what Green Bay was viewed then, if that makes sense. So I think Green Bay's been overvalued for a while now. And that Commanders game, I think, opened Green Bay 5.5 and got bet down.
You are correct. It did. Now, was that the first? That was the first Taylor Heineke game, if I recall.
It was, yes.
I think that the market views Green Bay slightly higher than Minnesota. Now, whether you agree or not with that being the case, I think that the market has Green Bay probably a half point better than the Vikings. It's really hard to say that for certain because obviously we have Green Bay, Buffalo, Sunday Night Football, and Buffalo, the spreads on their games are just going to be very large against opponents. It's going to be very hard to take away what the true ranking is for the opponent. But I think something like 4.5 Minnesota sounds right. But like, as I say that, if I say that out loud to myself, I would immediately bet Washington. Like, and I think everyone would. Like, who's going to go lay 4.5 with Minnesota on the road? So I don't know that it can be 4.5. It might have to be lower. It might have to be 4. And even then, I still think that it's going to be one-way Commanders money.
Yeah. That'll probably be the first game I check once we close this one off, because I'm very, very, very curious of what they open. But I think it's anything over 4 gets bet to the Commanders, and it's one way, like you said.
Minnesota's been on a run of high-scoring games. Since week 3, 52 points, 53 points, 51 points, 40 points. And then today against the Cardinals, 60 points. So they've been playing some pretty high-scoring games. Washington, on the other hand, since week 3, now granted different quarterback situation, but 32, 35, 38, 19, 44, 33. So different dynamics here. Probably would just throw this total out at 44 and say, let's see where it's going to go. I think it would go towards over, personally, just because the Vikings, I think, profile as more of an over team than the Commanders do an under team. But I think 44 is probably the number I'm sending out, and I'm expecting, if any action to be to come in, to be on the over.
Yeah, listen, here's what I wrote down for the game quickly. I wrote down Vikings 4.5, 43.5. So, I mean, I kind of talked myself into the fact that I think the Vikings might open higher, but kind of in the same ballpark.
Pretty much on par there. So no major discrepancies yet, me and you, this week. Okay. Chargers come off the bye week. They go to Atlanta. They play the Falcons. I don't know what the Chargers wide receiver situation is going to look like. Mike Williams did miss the game prior to their bye, as did Keenan Allen. Was back, I believe, for that specific game, but they were also missing Josh Palmer. Kind of matters if they're depending on like what they have at wide receiver. Man, Atlanta, they stink. The Falcons are bad.
I can't tell. So I didn't get to watch much of that game, minus like the last 4.5, 5 minutes. I got to see almost all of that nightmare of an ending of a game for anybody who had, Carolina. There was no shot that should not have covered or been even a sweat, and it turned into a nightmare. But is it that teams are adjusting to Mariota a little bit? Because I didn't get to see enough of the game. I mean, they still put up 37 points, but I looked at Mariota's numbers specifically, and they weren't that strong.
It's that Mariota stinks, and it's starting to like become a real problem. They're a run-first team. They can move the ball pretty effectively on the ground, but they just don't have enough in the passing game. And, I mean, looking at today's numbers, Atlanta and Carolina specifically, I mean, not horrible offensive numbers for Atlanta. 6.1 yards per play. 45% success rate, pretty average stuff. They went 6 of 12 on third down, like just a day. Like they had a day. Now, funny enough, today specifically, the Falcons had a high success rate passing the ball and very low running the ball, but they don't want to do that. That's not their identity. It's not who they are. And they just basically want Mariota to throw as little as possible. The question is now, the matchup for me in this, because ordinarily, like if I knew nothing about these teams, I would love the Chargers coming off of a bye here, opportunity to get back on track against what I feel is not a great team, but the Chargers can't stop the run. They just get run over by a lot of these teams over and over. So can they even stop the Falcons if they want to? I feel like Herbert's going to have a huge day, but I could also see the Falcons putting together these long drives that just keep them on the sidelines for long periods of time.
Yeah. God, what has the Chargers' average total been? It's got to be pretty big.
I mean, I don't know what the number in this game is yet in terms of total, but I can tell you I wouldn't bet the under with like my worst enemy's money in this game.
Yeah, this is probably the second highest total of the week, I think.
It's a 50s, no? Probably.
Probably, but I think the Seattle Arizona game's probably a little bit higher. So if this one was around 49, 49 and a half, I wouldn't be shocked, but I think it gets bet over if it's opening at that. I thought we saw the return of points today. That was not the case for late games, but it's a high total. But I have a hard time with Atlanta. Like, I think I still have them perceived as better offensively than they were from the first few weeks. We didn't talk about the side either, did we?
No. I mean, I honestly think that there's only one number that it can be. Let me put it that way. I think the only number that this game can be, and probably around where it closes, is Chargers -3.
Okay.
Because I think that's by far the most likely outcome in the game. By far, is Chargers win by 3.
I have 3.5, but okay. I had a light 3.5, not
okay.
like a full. So I think we're on the same page for the most part. I think I'm looking at Atlanta as terrible, but the Chargers haven't been great either. So to be fair,
the problem with the Falcons, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's going to be taken into account here, but their secondary sucks. Jalen Hawkins is hurt. AJ Terrell is hurt. Who did they lose to IR? I'm drawing a blank here. Oh, Casey Hayward to IR. So, like, if they have those problems in the secondary, the Chargers will be able to throw on them because the Falcons generate no pass rush whatsoever. We saw that today against Carolina. PJ Walker had a lot of time to throw on some of these instances. So I'm going to say Chargers -3. Don't know where the number will go. Honestly, think it closes 3, personally. Total is 51. And I'm inclined to say scoring went up a little bit. We had some higher scoring games today again, finally. Some shootouts. I'm inclined to say it still gets bet over.
Yeah, I think this is a clear over game, unless something unforeseen happens, where somebody doesn't play that we would think would play. It's a big number.
Yeah,
50 is better than my number, I think, too. Could be a fun game to watch, though.
Could be. Raiders, we talked about flu game. Apparently, they're staying in Florida this week because they're taking on the Jags. Jags get the trip back from London. I find this one very challenging because the Jags had a standalone game, which they lost to a Broncos team, which people don't think very highly of. Weird game because early on felt like the Jags were just going to run away with it, and then they couldn't get anything going in the second half. Denver survives with like Baron Browning's hurt, Randy Gregory's hurt. They still get a pass rush. They still play great defense. They win that game. Raiders, as we talked about earlier, was an absolute like complete dud. Prior to this week, I would have guessed that the Raiders would be favored in this game. Now I think the Jags open as a small favorite or maybe pick 'em range.
So what would you have had the Raiders before this week versus the Jags?
So
2.5?
On my own personal numbers, roughly that, yes.
If the market downgrades the Raiders that much and it opens, say it even opens pick, Raiders probably get play from sharp bettors, no?
My guess is that the Jags will open as a favorite and the Raiders will close as a favorite.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, we're on the same page.
I would think.
Because I've downgraded the Jags a decent chunk too from what they were in the beginning of the season. It's like I don't know how many more weeks of this that I need to see that maybe this is just the team that they are, where they're not going to execute well. Maybe they're not completely living up to the talent that they have. And this is just what they are. So I am in agreement with you that the Raiders close a favorite. I have a hard time opening this game, though. Like what I think the market would open at versus what I think it should be.
Yeah. I don't know, man. I don't know what the Jags, like, they look good for spurts. Then they're like Trevor Lawrence. How many red zone interceptions is this guy going to throw this year? I don't know, but I do feel like the Raiders will be quote unquote sharp side. It depends on the price, obviously, but if we were to see what I expect to see, which is Jags open small favorite, something like -1, I think this game will flip in terms of going over to the Raiders. Now, in terms of a total, Jacksonville, they've played more lower scoring games than people seem to realize this year, but their distribution is all over the place. Like they've had a few, high scoring games. They've had 3 games 50 or higher. They've had, a few games of 24, 19. Las Vegas, to me, despite the 24-0 game today, profiles as a pure over team. Like Las Vegas to me is top 10 offense, horrible defense. I think that this is going to be like 47.5, 48.
So Raiders Saints today were 48.5.
Mm-hmm.
You have this as a point worse. Do you think that's enough?
So I think that the Las Vegas offense needs to be downgraded.
Sure. Do you think the Jags, though, have a better offense or have better offensive expectancy than the Saints, even with the injuries?
Well, I mean, let's actually pull this up going into this week. So I had them pretty close. Now, this would be a standalone because, again, I like to reference Unpredictable in terms of like what the market thinks. And the market would have thought that the Jags offense is 1.4 points below average and the Saints offense is 0.3. Yeah. So basically the Saints offense being 1 point better. So, I mean, I'm just talking myself into 47.5 being the right number. If I thought 48.5 was what closed today, I don't necessarily think that's truly the case, but that's where I think this number will be.
Okay. I mean, I think I like the under at that number, but I could see it opening there. I think I'm probably downgrading the Jags a little bit too much too.
Yeah. Side tangent here. Anyone time somebody complains or says that, getting the best of the number does not matter, I'll use this one example of Mason Crosby missing this 55-yard field goal here, but I do get a push, a very sweaty push on Bills -10 at a very good off-market number. Very, very, very sweaty. We will get to the Bills and Packers games for next week as well now that they are final, but we'll keep moving on here. Seahawks at Cardinals. You referenced this already, Clive, in terms of seeing a super high total. Seahawks are going to start commanding some market respect, right? Like it's going to happen.
So you brought up Unpredictable, right? Like,
yep.
I like using their numbers too. It gives me a decent little baseline of seeing where teams are, and it's got the offensive and defensive side of it. I mean, Seattle was still 2.5 points under, or 2.6 to be precise. Yep. How much can you still upgrade them at this point? Like, do you upgrade them to 1.5 under average? Or are you getting them even closer to average? I don't view the Giants still as a good football team, so I can't overly maybe this is a team that the public overreacts to after this week.
Possibly. I'll say this about Seattle. I've imported all of today's data with the exception of the Green Bay Buffalo game, which is not out yet in its completion. Let's take a look specifically at the Seahawks defense. If I adjust their success rate on defense to the quality of competition that they face this year, which I'm going to guess has mainly been good offenses. Let's go across the schedule. I mean, they played San Fran, Detroit, New Orleans, Arizona, Chargers. I mean, not super crazy good, but I guess teams that have had high success rates offensively this year. I get their defense as the third best adjusted success rate defense in the entire league.
Wow.
Which I think is absurd, like nuts. That I cannot believe how far the Seahawks defense has come in the last 3 weeks. Like, think of what they've done in the last 3 weeks. They completely shut down Kyler Murray. They completely shut down the Chargers offense. Today, they completely shut down the Giants offense. I mean, no elite offenses there, but it's not only an offensive team. Like, they're coming around on the defensive side of the ball as well.
Well, it's funny too, and predictable. They're 31 of 32 teams from a expected defense or defensive power rating, whatever term you want to use for it, which obviously does have to get bumped up. But they're now probably, to me, at the bottom of that middle chunk of teams now. Like, they've moved up from that lower third into that chunk, and I still think they have room to kind of grow and get better. Like, I think they're better than the Jags, better than the Browns, better than the Jets, Titans, Colts, Broncos. So I have them in the Cardinals Saints range, basically, and then the Dolphins are probably a tick above.
So my question would be this. Arizona took a lot of money against Minnesota this week for the most part. A lot of it was early, I will say, but Arizona was a pretty popular side, I guess, amongst sharps this week. As was Seattle in a sense, but that number didn't really come off of 3 over the course of the week at all. I do think more, sharps own Seattle than the Giants today. But if you were going to line that game today, if we were going to line Arizona and Seattle going into today, it was like Arizona's probably more than a field goal favorite.
Yeah. They're probably 3.5.
Right? It's got to, It's either 3 minus 120 today or minus 3.5.
Yeah.
That can't happen anymore.
No, now I'm struggling between 2 and 2.5 of where it opens.
And then who do you think draws? I have no idea who's going to draw money this week, because I sure as hell don't think people love to go to the window laying points with Arizona. A lot of times, they're a team that they've struggled in this type of role, and I don't want to get too caught up in like spots and stuff like that. But generally speaking, Arizona home favorite. It's not a role that people are running to back a team in, this team specifically. So,
and I haven't seen enough. I didn't see enough of numbers now that Hopkins is back. It's 2 weeks now in a row. I mean, the offense is putting up a few more points. I think if it's -2, you probably get action both ways. And you might see the number go 2.5 at one point. You might see it get to 1.5, and you just might see kind of back and forth where it settles at 2.
I'm going to say
maybe
2.5. 2.5. Arizona is the number I would probably send out. I don't know where it would go. I honestly don't know. I don't think the market truly respects Seattle enough yet to drive it down all that much. And I think the Cardinals have definitely been upgraded with DeAndre Hopkins back. They did play a few weeks ago. Remember, they did play a few weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
And Arizona closed, -2.5 at Seattle.
Yep.
So there's been a pretty big adjustment here. And this is with Hopkins back.
And that was a game where the Cardinals, how many 4th downs did they miss? Was that that was the big 4th down game, right?
I think they went 1 of 5 on 4th down.
Yeah, something like that. So although Seattle won, I think the metrics probably had the game a little bit closer than what the final was. So yeah, I mean, I'm probably comfortable sending out 2.5 and then see where it gets bet.
Yeah, just I don't know that. This one's really hard. I think in terms of confidence level for me, I have no idea where the market will go. In terms of total for these teams, I'm also not sure, because, again, they played a very low scoring game, right? 19-9. And there's going to be some, I don't want to say recency bias, but like that's fresh in people's minds. They played a few weeks ago as a low scoring game. I typically think this would be a very high total. But I think it actually might get money towards the under. So I'm going to say something like 50, and the under takes a bit of money.
I wrote down 50 for this game. This was the highest one that I had. You talked me into a higher Chargers Falcons number, to be honest, but this was the highest one that I had written down for now, and 50 was the exact number.
All right. We move on. A battle of disappointments. Bucks host the Ravens. God, what a game. What an ugly game. Tampa's got extra rest. I'm not sure if that matters for this team anymore. Maybe Brady's going to turn it around now that the divorce papers have been filed and he doesn't give a shit anymore.
Yeah,
Is that possible?
maybe. Yeah, I guess. I don't know. He's looking a little gaunt too these days. Like he's not necessarily looking like, a healthy Brady.
Guy's in his mid 40s, man. We forget he's in his mid 40s.
Yeah, he definitely looks a little different than he did last year. And I keep downgrading the Rams more and more each week. So maybe this number that I'm thinking of is, I don't know what the right word is, a little over ambitious, but I wouldn't be shocked if I like Tampa 3 minus 120.
Oh, wow. Okay. You're higher than me. So I'm
This is
lower
because
than
this is me anti-Rams. I think this is just me way too anti-Rams. I'm being completely transparent.
So it might be. Rams drew money this week. So did the Bucks. They both let their backers down. Disappointing for both of their backers. I think the Bucks are viewed as slightly better than the Rams, like slightly. I will say, like I think like -2 Bucks, -2.5, maybe. I would be more inclined to say the Bucks get bet because of the extra rest. There's nothing to like about the Rams right now. You don't even know about Cooper Kupp, who like hobbled off the field at the end of. I think he avoided like a major ankle injury. If he's out, like this will fly through 3. But I'm definitely on the other side of 3 than you.
Yeah, and maybe that's a closing number that maybe you get to, but I am just so down on the Rams. I think I'm just really overreacting.
These teams both stink.
They're not fun to watch.
The Bucks have major injuries in the secondary. We'll see if they get it. I think Antoine Winfield has a concussion, so maybe he's back this week. Carlton Davis, Sean Murphy-Bunting, like they need some corners back. Are the Rams a team that's going to exploit it? I don't know that they are necessarily. Man, this total is going to be low too. Like what was the Rams San Fran total today? 42? It's going to be in that same range.
Yeah, I have 41.5.
Yeah. I'll probably say 42.
Yeah, I'm just so anti-Rams, to be honest. It's just bad. Everyone watching, go with Rob's number, I think. But I think at 2 like if it opened at 2.5, I would be betting it as soon as we get off this call.
Yeah, I don't blame you, but there you go. I mean, if it's low, if it's in my range, you heard it from Clive. Go bet it before the show's done. Sunday Night Football, KC hosting the Tennessee Titans. I assume Ryan Tannehill will play, and they just kept him in Tennessee or whatever as a precaution. He also had like illness or something, flu maybe. Don't really know what it was, but I'm assuming it's going to be a Tannehill game. Hopefully, it is for entertainment purposes because no offense to Malik Willis, might end up being a good pro. Don't really want to see a team hand off the ball 69 times in a game. It's not what I'm looking for. There is something to take note of here, which if you've been following football for the past 2 decades, you're going to hear a lot about Andy Reid off the bye this week. It is going to be a big one. Very good record, ATS, with an extra week to prepare. I think the Titans are going to come back down to earth at some point. But I think the problem is everybody also knows this and believes that. There's going to be a premium price on the Chiefs this week, in my opinion. There has to be. And when I say a premium price, I think back of Tennessee went on the road to Buffalo earlier this year. Granted, that was earlier in the year. Buffalo wasn't as good as they were now. And they closed as like a 10-point dog in that game, 9.5-point dog. I think the Chiefs will be an even bigger favorite than
that. I have 11.
Yeah. I'm very close. I would say 10.5. Very close, though. maybe I'd even bump to 11 because of the Andy Reid off of a bye factor, or 11 and a half or something like that. But it's got to be a number to entice somebody to take Tennessee, and single digits does not entice anyone to take Tennessee.
No, and I mean, like we kind of talked about earlier, the two tiers or the top two tiers, it's above and beyond everybody is Buffalo, then it's KC, then it's everybody else. But that KC is still a strong 7 point or so above, average team, something like that. So it has to be a double digit number. If it's not, I'm stunned.
So I think you're typically better at pricing totals than I am.
Yeah.
This one to me is extremely challenging because the Titans want to slog it up as much as possible. They want to run the ball, do some play action here and there, but they really want to limit the number of possessions in this game, right? As any big underdog in any sport would like to do. That's going to be the Titans' game plan. They're going to try to run the ball. That's what they're going to do. KC's the opposite. They'll play fast at home. They can air it out. They don't really have the downfield threat like that they had in years past with Tyreek Hill, but they still score. And I mean, if we're looking at Chiefs totals this year in terms of final score, their median final score has been 59 points. They've had some high scoring games. So
yeah.
You get these dichotomies, right? Where it's like complete opposite ends of the spectrum. And where do you end up putting the total in this game?
I'm trying to see what the Chiefs opened or where the Chiefs ended up last week.
See, we have some guesses in the chat here. So we have Michael says 43, Eric says 44. I would immediately, without even thinking, bet the over at both of those numbers.
Uh-huh.
You cannot have a Chiefs total under 44.
And I think I'm high. I do think it gets I think it would lean towards the under. I wrote down 47.5, but
okay.
It's not because I think that's what it should be. I think that's what it would open at, if that makes sense.
And
maybe it's 47.
I think 47. I do think that the market is more likely to go under than over on this game. Galaxy brain themselves into some sort of, I don't think I could bet the under here, but I think that that's the way that the market will go. Primetime unders, man. Just look at how this Bills Packers game was going to fly over, like it was off the rails early, bunch of touchdowns, another primetime under hits. People talk themselves into the craziest shit.
I mean, KC San Francisco closed at 49.
Yeah.
2 weeks ago.
San Fran has a real offense, though.
Yeah, but was it perceived that way 2 weeks ago?
True. Yeah, that's a valid point. It's a valid point. It's all about the perception of these teams in market, really, with these early numbers. Yeah. Definitely double-digit spread. I think one of us, I'd be surprised if one of us didn't hit it with 47 or 47.5. I think those are two good guesses. Monday Night Football. Ravens at Saints. So the Ravens coming off extra rest. So the Ravens had the same exact thing happen that the Eagles are going to get eventually as well, where they played Thursday and now they're playing Monday Night Football.
Except that they're on the road this time, and the Eagles, I think, are home against the Commanders, if I'm remembering right. Yeah, they are.
I think this is very easy, personally.
Then I'll let you start because I don't know if it's as easy, but I don't do well with the Saints.
Yeah, I think Ravens -3 on the road is a very easy number. Total, very similar to what we saw the Saints total at today against the Raiders. Maybe just slightly lower because the market likes Baltimore's offense, defense a little bit more. But I'm going to say -3 and 47.5. My gut is that Baltimore will take money on the extra rest, and unless New Orleans gets some pieces back in their lineup, and my gut is that the over would get bet. But and that's just like my opinion of these teams in market. I think the Saints might still be underrated, though. I think they might be.
So I put 46.5 for a total, expecting it to get bet over.
Okay.
I have the Ravens as a little bit bigger of a favorite, but like I said, I'm having a hard time with this one. I think I'm pricing it what I would have my price. So like the Ravens -3 against the Saints, I kind of like,
Yep.
without really doing too much work. So I'll defer to you for sure on this for what you think it should open at.
I think that these games are a little bit tougher in the sense that like we don't know what the opening numbers could be, but like I think the market's going to settle around 3, and because I think that's just naturally where the opener would come, and people are entitled to bet it whichever way they want. But yeah, I agree with Eric in the chat. Like I think Saints 3.5 shows and it gets bet personally. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe New Orleans just doesn't command that respect in market. But Baltimore is not like a team, again. This is different than the Ravens from 5 years ago where they were winning by margin consistently, right? They've struggled to close out games. I don't know. I feel like that. I feel very confident in that number. Baltimore 3. I would have a hard time betting that. Obviously, if my model shows an edge, I'll bet it. But like just instinctively, I don't know which side I like at 3.
Okay, I mean that's fair. I'm looking through like unpredictable, and depending on how much you upgrade the Saints for this week, if you do it all, I think it would be 3 to 3.5 is what, based strictly off those numbers.
Yeah,
and I was giving Baltimore a little bit extra rest, but like I said, I have a hard time with this game.
We'll probably get to. I'll rewind here. We'll go over a couple games that we skipped over because of Sunday Night Football, and we'll end with these 2 games. We'll probably like these numbers probably aren't even available in market yet, so this will be like one where we're guessing before it's even posted, no matter what. Maybe some actionable info for anyone who's listening live when the numbers go up at their sports books. But Buffalo Bills at New York Jets. Jets suck today, man.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when I say they suck, their offense sucked. Their defense played well again, but I can't get over how bad Zach Wilson is. Buffalo did not win. Well, they did win by margin. They won by 10. So I don't want to like discredit them. Spread closed 10.5. So Buffalo does not cover.
So I saw none of the second half, by the way. I saw Diggs have some sort of issue, and I didn't see any news. Did he come back in the second half?
I'm not sure. He did have a couple catches in the second half because he had 4 receptions at halftime.
Then he played. Okay.
All I know is that because it's on the screen, my monitor on the side here, and I wasn't paying attention the full time. I did see Josh Allen throw a red zone pick, like from the 5-yard line, which sent me just into like an absolute, like on another planet when I saw it. And there was another pick that he threw as well. But man, it's getting like, how do you price the Bills? Like what? Like I'm not saying like books want to draw equal action on both sides of the game or whatever, but they also don't want this to be like a complete one-way street on Buffalo, right? And what line makes it appealing for someone to take the Jets?
For me, what I'm thinking of, where I'd be like, it's not an auto bet, but I'd really think about it, is 14.5. Like it's got to be high for me to love the Jets, especially after what I saw today. I mean, do the Bills open at 13.5-point favorites on the road to the Jets? I don't see that happening.
No, I don't see that either.
But should that be the price? I don't know.
I have tough times with Bills games. It's really hard. Just so you know, Scott does mention in the chat that Diggs did do post-game interview, so he should be good to go. I will also point out, everyone who listens to this on a weekly basis, I'm very clear to point out, like when a team suffers a big injury, we've had weeks where there's been crazy amount of injuries. This week was pretty clean. Like we didn't really have anything that's I'm significantly monitoring going into next week, cluster injuries, anything like that. So just to point that out for people out there. Wow. Is it Bills 13?
So the Patriots closed what today? 3
Yeah. Yeah. So it
on the
can't be
road.
that high. Yeah. Okay. Let's put it this way, right? Can't be single digits
No.
because that's auto bet Buffalo.
Hmm.
Don't think it can be as high as, honestly, even 13 or 14 because I think that's auto bet Jets. It's got to be in the range, like that middle range there. You don't see spreads like this a lot, right? Like 11, 11 and a half, 12. But like that's kind of where it needs to be put out. And then the market can decide where to go with it or not. I think, you're going to get a lot of Jets catching 11 and a half at home. Like people, that will be enticing to people. Like it's a home game. It's a divisional home game where they're, getting that many points. I'll say 11 and a half, but it kind of has to be there.
Yeah, I mean the market probably does have the Bills as about 9 points, maybe a little bit less, maybe 8 than the Patriots, something like that. So 11 and a half, 12, I think is probably fine. The books aren't going to have a hard time getting money on Buffalo this week. I know that. It's just a matter of, what number would entice people to bet the Jets, and it's got to be at least 13, I think, to get any kind of Jets consideration. It's just very difficult to bet against the Bills. It's all price. I mean, I think we both understand that, and
Yep.
most of our listeners probably do at this point. But I don't know, 11 and a half, 12, I think is probably fine.
Wherever the Green Bay Buffalo total closed tonight is where I think that the Jets Bills total will be next week. So what was the closing
40,
total tonight? 47.
47.
Yeah. That is what I think the total will be. I think the Jets are very, very similar. Listen, I'm not comparing Zach Wilson to Aaron Rodgers. That's not what I'm doing. But like just the style of play overall and how I think the team is viewed in terms of a totals number in market, I think it'll be 47. I might be interested in that under, and I will have to
Yeah,
sweat the entire game because you got hope Zach Wilson doesn't throw a pick six, basically.
I'm trying to figure out what number I'd want to stop betting the over.
Man, I just caught a glimpse of myself, and this stash has got to go ASAP. It's
Well, I left that alone. I thought maybe you'd commented on it at some point, but
no, it was for a Halloween costume for like a Halloween party, and I just like woke up for the London game. I didn't get a chance to shave it today, and I looked like,
yeah,
why
I
did I
think
do
that
this to
Halloween
myself?
picture of yours is like how supervillains are made. I think that's like an origin story. Like that's what we're probably looking at there. Uh,
My wife has never seen me with like a mustache, so when she saw this yesterday, she was like, no, this has to go. And now I'm seeing it myself as I look back at myself on the screen. I'm like, can't believe I did shows with this thing today.
you're looking more and more like Pizza Man for sure.
Yes, definitely fit the pizza buffet vibe this morning.
Yeah, so at 47, I think I like the under, like instinctively. Um, Maybe it's 46 that it opens at. I don't know. I have a hard time where there's that much of a difference between. I think the Jets' offense is really bad, and I think it's really bad without Hall, like really bad. So I don't know. At 47, I think I bet under. 46, I have a much harder time deciding, and again, that's just instinctive.
All right. Before we get into the final game here, for those who are still with us on YouTube, on Twitch, on Twitter, wherever you are, hit the subscribe button. Do us a favor. It is valuable for us in the long run. We do want to keep putting out great content. Obviously, growing our followers will help us do that. So, whatever platform you're on, please hit that subscribe button, hit that thumbs up. If you're listening to this on delay on Monday, no problem at all. Just give us that thumbs up and subscribe wherever you are listening to us. Final game will be the Green Bay Packers at Detroit Lions. NFC North disappointments.
So before we get into that, how many likes and subscriptions and views will it take for you to keep the mustache?
I mean, technically, it is Movember, right? Which
Yeah.
is, I would do a clean shave on November 1st and then just grow out the mustache and keep shaving. I used to do that years ago, many, many years ago. So, I mean, I could do it for charity, but I am attending a wedding in Mexico next week for a very good friend of mine. I don't think I can show up with the stash.
That's fair.
I mean, those people don't know me. So for all they know, this could just be my look. For all the people that already do know me, though, it's going to be really weird. So I don't know that there is an amount of money. I don't want to ruin my buddy's wedding. You know what I'm saying?
Fair. We can come back to this later, maybe in the season. Maybe it's a playoff thing. So Packers on the road to the Lions. Similar situation, right? Like Miami closed 3.5 on the road, 4-4.
The Packers are worse than Miami.
But did the market view them that way before this week? I don't think they did.
No, they didn't. But there's good, and the Packers don't get downgraded either. The Lions maybe, I don't know. I don't even know any. But the Packers are worse than Miami. I feel confidently about that. If you gave me the Packers and Dolphins and a pick 'em, I'm taking the Dolphins.
Yeah. So I think the Lions get downgraded even more. I think that we've been generous. Not that we. I mean, the market's just been generous with the Lions as a whole. I think if you open Green Bay -4, you get Green Bay money. I think. I would probably say Green Bay 4.5 and just see where the money goes. But I'm probably downgrading the Lions too much.
Wow. This is a tough game because I would love to bet against both teams if they weren't playing each other next week. So I will disagree. I think that the line will open the same as it was. Dolphins closed today. So Green Bay -4. I think that's the opener. I think people are still going to bet the Lions. I think that there's such a negative sentiment on Green Bay's offense now that the Lions will still catch money. It's going to be, can Green Bay win by margin? Green Bay already was in this role against Washington a few weeks ago. They lost outright in that game. This is a team that can't score enough to cover 5 on the road or whatever. Give me Detroit. Not saying that's right or not, but that's how I feel that this Packers team is perceived right now.
Okay. Well, I mean, I could see it. I mean, if there's ever a team to get right against offensively, it is Detroit.
So this is the problem too. Like, where do you put the total? Like Green Bay's games are all low scoring. Green Bay's played one game in the 50s all year. I mean,
so minus the red zone pick today, right? Like, I think over 47 was the right play today, especially with what we saw in the first half.
Yep.
Detroit has a sizably worse defense and offense than Buffalo, but the defense is worse. 48.5.
Every Detroit home game this year has been fireworks, right? Because they had 2 low scoring games. There was the one they got shut out against New England. That was on the road. And it was on the road at Dallas coming out of their bye week. Those were the 2 low scoring games where their offense did nothing. Aside from that, all the home games, offense has been cooking. The offense can score. Defense can't stop a lick. I mean, I don't know that I would be rushing to bet over 48.5 with the Packers offense right now, but instinctively feels a little bit low to me.
Well, I know I couldn't bet an under, I don't think. But to your point, like, I'd have a hard time betting on an over with the Packers offense too.
Yeah, when you see these, I rehash this every week, but I really mean it when I say it, is that when we get these teams that are on different ends of the extremes, I find it very challenging to come up with what the right number should be, because when I'm talking myself into it, or when I'm thinking about this game, despite the fact that I've seen nothing of the Packers offense all year. Like, they can't throw deep. They're more of a heavy run team now, everything like that. All I think about in my head is, like, this is the game where the Packers offense gets on track. It's not, this is the game where the Lions defense finally gets some stops. This is the game where the Packers offense gets on track. That's what's going through my head right now. So because of that, my total, I guess, is a little bit higher, probably like 49.5, but I might be completely off. Like, I wouldn't know one way or another, because I just have no feel for there's such a wide range of what this game could be.
Right. No, I agree. When you start to get that dichotomy of bad defense, but high scoring games, but bad offense on the other side of the ball. It's hard to know which way it's going to go. And it's hard to take a Detroit under unless you're playing a substantially good defense, which Green Bay's what, in the middle of the pack, probably?
Yeah, but so like Green Bay has a weakness against the run, and they're decent against the pass. Tough one.
Yeah.
We didn't have too many big disagreements this week, which is, I mean, this is going to happen, right? Like we're getting into week 9 of the NFL. We have so many data points to use now. It's going to be hard for us to come up with like extreme numbers. Like
it is.
And we follow the league really closely and the market really closely. Like if I ask some of my close friends, they'll always come up with an absurd number on a game. Like Dolphins Bears, they'd be like, "Oh, how are the Dolphins not 7.5 point favorites?" Like they won't think about anything else relating to how the market has valued these teams. But yeah, we're pretty much in tune this week.
Yeah, and I think the more and more we're going to get through the season, it's going to be, for me, a little bit of a blend between like, all right, well, what does the market perceive these teams as versus now I've seen enough of these teams to where I think they should be. And the open and the close, I mean, maybe you don't see as much as many good CLV opportunities because like everything starts to kind of, I don't know what the right word is. Damn it. It becomes less fragmented.
I know what you're saying. There's less uncertainty.
Yeah. And then the opportunities start to come more from if you see some sort of stylistic change, like you mentioned with the Bengals, right? Like they're changing their offense and going away from what hasn't been working. Like those are where the opportunities come. Like teams aren't unknowns anymore. You're not going to get those.
Right. All right. That'll do it for us on Forward Progress. I will let the viewership know next week I will not be doing Forward Progress live with Clive. Surprise co-host coming up with Clive next week. Don't want to spoil the party or anything like that. But I will be away for a good friend of mine's wedding. Something I have to deal with. Get away for a week. I am here tomorrow night, though. Primetime. NFL, Monday Night Football. Bengals, Browns. Myself, Eric Eager of Sumer Sports. If you're following on the Forward Progress channel, also hit that subscribe button on the Hammer HQ channel. That's where we go live for primetime every single week. It's just dawning on me right now that I have no idea how I'm going to do the show tomorrow because it's Halloween and I'm going to have to hand out candy from 8 to 8:15 and my wife is not home. So we're going to have to figure that out in the next 24 hours or 12 hours or so. Get some sort of plan set up. That's going to be a fun one. Doorbell going off in the background the entire time. I do love Halloween though. It's great event. Great holiday.
Enjoy the wedding.
Yes, I will. I don't even know if you know who's co-hosting with you next week.
I don't. I have an idea, but
yes. So we'll get that locked down. But do want to keep the momentum going. People do value the show, and we do enjoy doing it. Tortellini handing out candy. Wouldn't that be something? Problem is they take tortellini is the issue. I can't risk somebody taking tortellini away as well. Ask the kids to give their picks for the game. Wouldn't that make great content? Bunch of underage kids giving gambling picks for the game. How quickly we would get shut down off YouTube. 3-strike policy on YouTube. By the way, leave a bucket of candy out front, like Scott says. That never works. There's always some asshole kid who just comes and takes the whole bowl and like that's it. Ruins it for everyone else. And when it's I say
the person who ruins the market, betting too early, like some of these times, it's the same thing.
Exactly. But what I was going to say is like, I was once that asshole kid. And then I'm like, now so karma, it has a way of catching up to you. But yeah, you can never leave the bucket of candy up front. That house is also going to get very likely, when I say very likely, greater than 50% chance egged or toilet papered as well. If you're going to not take Halloween seriously, then that's going to be the case. But that'll be it. I'm sure you guys really love hearing me telling my Halloween stories out there. For Rob Pizzola, for Clive Bixby, for our producer Jason Cooper, this has been Forward Progress, our Week 9 look ahead here on the Hammer Betting Network. Please like and subscribe, and Clive will catch you next week. I'll catch everyone tomorrow night. Peace.
Thanks for joining.